So I am going to reinforce some of the things the Chief of Staff of the Army said, because he does set my priorities, and he's the boss. I'm also going to do something else. Every time the Chief gets up, he takes an opportunity to do two things: to talk about Boston and make fun of the Sergeant Major of the Army. And he's not here tonight, but I know we're recording this, and I'm sure we'll get it to him somehow. So he does talk about Boston. He's proud of his honor and history and tradition, and many of the senior leaders actually in the Department of Defense are from that same area. And they refer to it, and you'll hear the Chief often refer to it as the Holy Land. Well, I am from the motherland, which is Pennsylvania, the start of all this great nation that we have today and our United States Army. And I just want to make a simple fact that our Chief is also a big sports fan. And last weekend, Boston wasn't too holy, and the motherland prevailed. So, yeah. Now, the Chief's been away, and I haven't bothered him on email, but when he gets back, the Sergeant Major of the Army is going to reiterate the fact that the motherland has now prevailed once again. And it took us a long time to do that. But ladies and gentlemen, I do greatly appreciate your attendance tonight. I hope Ken and General Ham, you didn't spend too much money to rent the audience for me this evening. But what I promise to do is talk about some of the things. I'm going to start at a very strategic context of why we need to do what we're doing, and dive in a little bit about the National Defense Strategy that was just recently released. But I'm also going to bring that down to the soldier level, which is important. I call it our most critical resource, of which is also our greatest gift given to us by the American people. So I'd like to start with, and if you haven't, I'd ask and encourage you, because there is an unclassified brief summary. I love summaries because they're easy to read. It's only a few short pages. But I'm a very simplistic leader. I'm an infantryman by trade. I'm not as complex as the former Sergeant Major of the Army who's an armor tanker. I'm a Bradley Master Gunner, an infantry guy. But I was taught one thing as a young soldier. You can listen to the entire mission, but there's one thing you can't forget, and that's the commander's intent. And I would tell you is that you can very easily receive the commander's intent from the very first lines and the very first page of the National Defense Strategy. And I'd like to read it for you, because this is all the farther I had to read. Now, I encourage you to read the whole thing, all right, because there's a lot of good content in there. But for this young infantryman, this is all I pretty much need to know to get my commander's intent. The Department of Defense enduring mission is to provide combat-credible military forces needed to deter war and protect the security of our nation. Should deterrence fail, the joint force is prepared to win. And the lack of all other information from command and the breakdown of chain of command, the youngest soldier in the United States Army can achieve the Secretary of Defense, our commander's intent, just by reading that first sentence. And it's important because we hear the Chief of Staff of the Army talk about it all the time, that readiness is our number one priority. There is no other number one, and there is no equal. Readiness has to be the focus. And he talks about it and puts in perspective when he talks about the 187,000 soldiers that we have committed, allocated, and assigned to over 140 countries in support of 10 named operations of our 7 combatant geographical commanders. And that's critically important because most people in the United States do not know that today. And we'll talk about some of the things we have to do to help educate and inform better the population of America, which I believe we need to do. Because I'm profound on the statement, the simple fact that everybody in this nation, since its birth in the motherland, Pennsylvania, in 1775, knew that it would take an army to defend this nation and its beliefs. And you've heard the Chief talk about that often, what we stand for and what we believe in. And since that day, an army for this nation is a requirement. Nobody will refute that. I don't think anybody. There's people that will say bad things about a soldier, and we'll talk about some of that too as well. But nobody will refute the fact that it's a requirement for this nation to have a group of individuals ready to defend if need be. National Security Defense and National Defense Strategy says that. But today, our Army is built by people who volunteer. The nation, it's a requirement. As an individual, it's choice. First slide, please. So the Chief's number one priority is readiness. And that is the bedrock and the foundation and the principles of what we should be focused on every single day. And not just because he's my chief, it's because he's right. That's the number one thing we should be doing. The first and last soldier, to the soldier perspective, the way I spell to them is, the first and last soldier, regardless of your MOS, regardless of your duties and responsibilities, will be behind a trigger. And that's the way we have to think. The number one responsibility as an individual is to maintain deployability. And recently, we've seen some release and some talk about policies that are going to change with regards to deployability. And this is critically important, critically important. Not that we have to change anything different. Now, what I want to make a point is, though, we're talking about things like if you're not deployable for a 12-month period, then the command must start administrative separation. Or if you're deployable for 12 months in an 18-month period, it's proposed that you must start separation. Okay? And I don't want to confuse that with one thing. That doesn't mean we're not going to take care of people. It means that we've got to be focused on readiness. So we can't confuse that in our conversation with the American people and the American public. We have a commitment to the sons and daughters who are given to us. We have a responsibility to take care of them for the rest of their lives if we hurt them, if they are hurt in the cause and the duty of which we've asked them to do. But ladies and gentlemen, to wear the uniform, we have to make sure they're ready to fight and win. Because deterrence is our main goal, and we do that through strength and unity. So this is something we have to focus on, and we have been focused on for several years. Now I'm proud of the fact that we are making strides in our deployability rates. We're getting ready to brief Congress on that very shortly. But we still got a lot of work to do, in all honesty. And we have to do things in a more efficient and effective way to make sure that we achieve the highest deployable standards we possibly can. And we also have to do the right thing on the soldier that we have to separate. And that's called Soldier for Life, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. I just want to drop down to the bottom comment there, too. And this is probably one of the things that the chief relies on me heavily for every day, and that is responsible growth and sustain and retain the best. Now, the good news, because of our great elective leaders, about a year and a half ago, that said responsible drawdown. I'm glad that it no longer says that. I'm glad that it says responsible growth. Okay? So how do you do that as an Army? Well, it's very simple in two forms. You keep people and you get people. Okay? And that's called recruiting and retention. Now, I'd like to clear the air on some of the conversations that have been talked about this. Okay? So the Army has, with no better way to form it, been accused of lowering standards in order to make numbers. What I can assure you is you're Sergeant in the Army, that's not true. Okay? Now, there is a limited pool from which we can draw in this nation that is physically able and prepared to join our military. And it is a tough mission. And this mission that we've given to USAREC this year is one of the biggest missions we've had in many decades. 80,000 for our active duty is what we're asking USAREC to do. That's a tough mission. It's a very tough mission. It comes at great cost through marketing, communication, but bottom line, it's a human endeavor. Young men and women, normally at the rank of staff sergeant in hometowns of America, educating and communicating to the influencers, the mothers and fathers of the United States about the benefits and the sacrifices and challenges of being a United States Army soldier. And, the Army can't do that alone. So this is my message to the American people and to everybody in this room, and for fact, all the influencers. It's back to the fact that this nation has a requirement to have a standing Army to defend its values and beliefs. Okay? It takes an entire nation to build an Army, not USAREC, not recruiting command, not one general officer in charge of one command or one sergeant major or one chief. It takes us all. Because we all have a vested interest. We all have a responsibility to make sure, not only one, that we can give and retain the best soldiers that we possibly can, all right, but to uphold the honor, value, and traditions of serving as a soldier. Okay? So there was recent talk about the fact that the young men and women that come in the Army may not be at the caliber of which, well, I don't even want to go there. I'm not going to defend anything or go back on something, but here's what I can tell you. These young men and women are ready to do anything they're asked to do and willing to give their life for it. You can measure men and women in this nation by many measures. How much money they make, how much money their parents make, what university or college they went to. But if you measure against Sergeant Major of the Army standards, candor, courage, competence, commitment, service, sacrifice, duty, honor, integrity, personal courage, there is no finer, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about the measuring tape that you're using. Because I can tell you right now, the young men that I'm talking about, the young women, men and women that we're recruiting today, they embody and exemplify every single one of those characters. And it's important that we iterate that. We iterate the benefits and the values of being a soldier in the United States Army today and reinforce that fact. And we got to do a better job too. So the Army's got to do a better job at telling that story. The Army's got to do a better job at telling the story to mothers and fathers, because they have the same concern as this mother and father. They want a little bit better chance at life for their children than we have. And I'm going to tell you how we're going to do that. Okay? So Chief's number 2 priority. Next slide, please. The future of our Army. Now, there's a lot of ways we're getting after this. And nested with the new Secretary's priorities, in the top part of his priorities there, it's modernization and acquisition, and we're going to reform those things, and we're going to modernize, and we're going to get better at it. And just recently, as yesterday, I came from one of our great research centers up north in Boston, the Holy Land, I know. It is a great place. And we are, I can tell you, the institution, our leadership is re-energized in modernizing our force, working with our industry partners to make sure that we're capitalizing on research and development and standing technology, that we can better improve our resources that we give our young men and women to do that. And it's going to take time. It's going to take necessary resources, but I believe that we have those dedicated from our great elected leaders. But there's another facet of which the boss asked me to keep my eye on every single day, and that's our soldiers. And I always said that the greatest gift that is given to us and the intangible measurement of an army is its soldiers. There's no weapon design that can ever replace it. War, in its most simplistic form, is a conflict of wills between people. There are things and there are items that will change and affect the outcome of that war, but until you solve the conflict of wills between those people, ladies and gentlemen, war will persist. This is a people endeavor. It has and always will. And all throughout history, it has begun on land and will end on land. So for the foreseeable future, ladies and gentlemen, the most powerful weapon and our greatest resource is the American soldier. And we're doing a lot to invest in them. We took a look at our enlisted non-commissioned officer professional development system. And for years, we have boasted on the fact that we have the best non-commissioned officer corps in the world. And that statement is still true today, very much so. But there is an issue. We are no longer the country in the world that has recognized the value of a trained and educated enlisted force. They've studied our schools. They've come and visited our institutions. And ladies and gentlemen, there's potential adversaries that are investing in the same thing. They know the value. They are so much involved in replicating the resource we call the non-commissioned officer. And they want to make it happen. They know it's successful. So we can't stand and say that we are we are the best, and we will automatically just be the best because we are. And we had to take a really hard look at, does our non-commissioned officer professional development system serve the needs of the complex environment that we're asking our soldiers to fight in today, and the more complex environments that they'll fight in tomorrow? And the answer was no, it doesn't. And we took a look at this. It was called NCO 2020. And there were somewhat of 200 initiatives that we had to do to improve our capability of training and educating the next generation and the current generation of warfighter. So some of the things that we've did is made sure that we are given recent and relevant and academically challenging curriculum throughout our non-commissioned officer professional development system, while simultaneously accrediting that academic curriculum to make sure that our non-commissioned officers get equivalent credit to their civilian counterparts simultaneously as they go through their courses. If you give an example of one of the things that we've been working on for the last 5 years is accrediting our greatest academic institution, the United States Army Sergeant Major's Academy. Previous to the initiatives that we put into that academy, it was a year-long resident course, about 1,490 academic exposure hours, and what we believed to be at the graduate level or greater. But it was the way that we were evaluating them. We did some tunes to the evaluation only, not the curriculum. We invested into the infrastructure, the human capital of the professor. We sent our sergeant majors out to a great academic institution in America, got them trained at the graduate level, and in about 18 months, the United States Army Sergeant Major's Academy will be an academic accredited institution of higher learning in Middle States. And this is important. Okay? So this is not about getting non-commissioned officers' degrees. That's a benefit of hard work and equivalency. Right? This is about training and educating our soldiers for the complex environments they will live in, they will fight in, and that are demanded of them, while simultaneously accrediting them for the hard work that they do. So when they leave this uniform and they become soldiers for life, they'll have that benefit. Talent management. The new secretary is big on the new talent management. He's asked us to take a look at everything. Don't be comfortable with what we're doing, from officer system to our warrant officer system to our non-commissioned officer education system and our leader development system. And we're taking a look at our systems that we've had in place. Largely our talent management systems have been in place just after World War II, and many of those things still continue today. And we can't be satisfied with how we're managing talent. We're buying software called IPSA-A. It's going to help us tap into the undiscovered talent that we have in our formations today. It's going to give us the ability to look at all the knowledge, skills, and attributes well beyond the current structure that we look at and be able to manage those attributes centrally. So if we need someone with a specific skill, we can draw that skill from inside of our formation. We don't capitalize on those things today, but that's where we want to be in the future, to make sure that we're managing talent for the future. One of the big initiatives we did for our non-commissioned officer corps this last year was create upward mobility. We made a decision several years ago to extend retention control points for our senior non-commissioned officers out of need. It was a time where we had to grow our Army rapidly. One of the choices that you can make is extend those people who currently serve. But what we found out is that we reduced significantly the opportunity for our young men and women. And we had a choice. We could retain our senior non-commissioned officers, some of those for 24 months, or we can invest in our junior and non-commissioned officers who had potential retainability of 10 to 15 years. And we had to make a tough choice. So in doing so, we asked a lot of our non-commissioned officers, who were all retirement eligible, going to receive the guaranteed benefit they deserve for their service. And we took that infrastructure and placed it into our mid-grade non-commissioned officers to give them opportunity. We increased our aggregate promotion rate of senior non-commissioned officers from 8%, the lowest it was in 30 years, to about 30 to 40% in some MOSs. And what does this do? Creates opportunity, creates initiative inside the formation, and it extends that wartime experience. That wartime experience is that sergeant first class, that staff sergeant, that major, that captain of today that is going to stay in the service for the next 10 to 15 years and carry on that wartime experience to the next one or even two generations of soldiers that we bring in the service. Army University is our way of getting after modernizing our entire education system across the Army. It's combining the officer system, the warrant officer system, and the non-commissioned officer professional development system in one university structure, which will make us the largest academic institution in the United States of America, with the capability to deliver simultaneously online training to 1.18 million soldiers and give true academic credit across all three approaches to training and education: warrant officer, officer, and enlisted. Army University is alive and well today. Still has a long way to go to develop. We can't build a university overnight, but the great team out at Fort Leavenworth is working hard to make this a reality for all of our soldiers. My goal is to tell every mother and father in 5 years that when you sign for the United States Army, you're joining the largest, most credible academic institution in America, the Army University, and to have real value behind it. Not just selling it on its history, but showing it. When you go to a school, we'll give you a certificate of training. All of us got them from the Fort Benning, Georgias, from all those places. But simultaneously, we'll spit out that little thing that says Army University, and this is how many college credits you get for each one of your academic experiences. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to start giving our soldiers credit for the hard work that they do, because that credit has value when they're no longer a soldier. And then the stewardship of the profession. Discipline is one of our challenges, and it has and always will be. And it is not something we're going to fix overnight, and it's not something that's ever going to end. This is a constant thing that we have to entertain. And my vision of this is get after the discipline problems with the leader that is closest and has the most ability to influence it, and that's the squad. And my initiative is called Not My Squad, and it is investing into our squad leaders, the same young men and women that we will put a rifle in their hand, give them 9 soldiers, and send them out on patrol in Afghanistan. But when we're back here, we won't give them the authority to do the right things, to train and educate their soldiers and to discipline them. This is to reinvest in the squad leader of the United States Army, to tell them and reassure them that they have not only the power and the authority to take care of those young men and women, but we're going to back them up when they make decisions and mistakes. We're going to discipline them when they fail to do their job, and we're going to promote them when they do it well. It's a reinvestment in the institution of what we call the first-line leader. If you want to make a difference, it's got to start at the bottom. Policies and procedures are fine, They help build programs, they put initiatives, they change cultures across the formation. But at the end of the day, if you want your post to look good, you've got to have soldiers do a police call. And that's just what it's going to be. And we're going to get our staff sergeants re-engaged and back into the formation, back into the barracks, doing the simple things. Because I tell my non-commissioned officers all the time that our Ranger battalions are very good. And not because they're special. It's because they do the simple things really good, over and over and over again. And every single formation in the United States Army can be a Ranger battalion. You just won't have the tab unless you go to school, but it can, okay? And their job, just like my job when I was a young staff sergeant, is to be able to say that if this is not the best squad in the Army, it's my job to do something about it, not somebody else's. Okay? If you need help, there's a whole line of people waiting to help you, but it's me. It's my job if this isn't the best squad in the Army. Last slide. And the great thing about the Chief's priorities, too, there's only 3 of them, so they're easy to remember. They're easy to remember for me. Okay? This is the non-negotiable task, taking care of our soldiers and families. And when I talk to our soldiers, I reference the picture on top there. You know, the old adage is, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And here's the commitment we have to doing this. So that is your son, nephew, cousin, friends, child, doesn't matter. But that young man deserves one thing, a little bit better chance at life than we had. That's our promise. That's the whole institution, the United States of America, invested in this organization to ensure that that young man has a little bit better chance at life than we did. Okay? And taking care of our soldiers and families. So what's at stake if we don't do this? Well, simple. It's our people. We talked about this at the Army Family Readiness Council this morning, where the senior leadership across the entire United States Army and all the stakeholders in all the families programs interested in getting into the very finest details of what we have to do to preserve what I say is my message to the American people. And I have given this challenge, and I maintain this challenge. We take better care of our people than any institution in the United States of America. We're not perfect, right? But if we know about it, we'll fix it. And there is no finer organization that takes better care of their people. And we got to maintain that commitment. It's not easy. It's a tough task. It's an enduring task every single day. So that's when you hear the chief, when he says this, he says this is the never-ending task. It is the zero-fail task. Okay? And we got to communicate this. And I talked about that earlier. How do we communicate that better to the people? How do we let the people know that there is something better for their son or daughter if they join this institution? Well, we got to credential them. For 240 years, we've been giving our soldiers world-class training and education at some of the finest institutions that this nation can offer. But yet, when they leave the Army, they can't drive a tractor trailer. When they leave the Army, they can't serve as an electrician in their hometown. When they leave the Army, they can't fix an HVAC system, even though they've been trained and educated to do it for the last several years. And we got to fix that. We got to invest in these young men and women. And the fear is that if you invest in them, they're going to leave. But I can assure you the analysis will tell you otherwise. And I can prove it every single time we invest in a soldier, we get a re-enlistment contract. The value of an institution is measured by its people. And the value a person has in their institution is measured by the worth of what they have within that institution, not the money they're getting paid by it. We got to continue to invest in these young men and women. Because every single mother and father in America knows the hazards of our chosen profession. They're very aware of it. We communicate it very well in our messages and our commercials. But what we don't communicate is the great things that we do behind the scenes for these young men and women every single day. The qualities and skills that they'll retain for the rest of their lives that are going to make them successful. The things necessary that when they take this uniform off are going to let them get a little bit closer to achieving the American dream. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that's what mother and fathers are worried about. Right. When Mr. and Mrs. Dailey gave their son away to the Army in 1988 and 89, they had no concept of me serving 30 years. I know this because my mom called me last week and she said, "Honey, are you coming home?" And, but they do know that they're a soldier. And they expect that we're going to give a little bit better product back. That's what they want. That's what they deserve. They deserve that. And we got to invest in these young men and women. And we got to communicate that to the American public. And we got to be clear about the fact that there are hazards of this chosen profession. We know that message is clearly resonated across the United States. We are the most trusted organization in the United States of America. But we want to be valued for everything that we do, not just our wartime mission, which is critically important, first and foremost, readiness, and it always will be. But we got to be valued for the great things that we do for these young men and women and the value they can bring back to their hometowns of America. And we're doing that through our Soldier for Life program. And how do we know this works? So in 2007, in the height of the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan, we were quickly identifying a problem. Our young men and women were actually joining our service at record rates. We're having great retention. And a lot of young men and women were serving their country and going home. But we had one of the lowest veteran employment rates we've seen. And the feedback from our veterans was, hey, I came and served, but the Army's a little bit too busy to take care of me right now. So we changed that. And the Chief, General Odierno, said we got to start investing in the next generation by investing in the one that's leaving today. And we started this Soldier for Life program. In 2007 is when it first kicked off. We started working on CSPs, what are called career skills programs, bringing industry to our installations to help train our young men and women who are leaving in the last 180 days on critical skills that were needed within the workforce around the United States. And what we found, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm proud to say is that in 2007, we were paying $500 million in unemployment compensation a year, and that's down to less than $150 million now. And that's not just an investment of money back into the pot so we can buy more guns. That's an investment into a man or woman for the rest of their lives. That's an investment into the future of a hometown in America, of a product that we gave back that was better than the one we received from a mother and father. And we got to continue to do that through credentialing programs and through our academic accreditation and equivalency programs. And then lastly, I have to remind our leaders all the time, because we're busy, not because they don't want to do it, but we got to recognize excellence. And we got to create a positive environment for these young men and women to want to thrive in. The goal every single day is that if the soldier's not happy about coming to work, then you're not doing your job as a leader. It's not about being nice. It's about taking care of young men and women. And you can do that. Create a positive environment and recognize excellence. And that's simple. That's calling that young man and woman up after they've served 2 or 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they've done their duty and they want to go home, and call them up to the formation and say, Specialist Johnson has done a phenomenal job. Let's give him a big round of applause. Those little things, ladies and gentlemen, leave a lasting impression. It's the last 90 days in people's careers of which that impression they carry for the next 60 to 70 years. I call it the walking billboard effect. And I'm going to share a little story, a true story, about a veteran I met on an airplane, a young man. I was in an airplane, I sat down, and this young man sat down next to me. And he started the conversation. He goes, are you in the service? I said, oh, yes, I am. He goes, you look like you're in the Army. I said, no, I'm in the Army. He said, what do you do? I said, I'm just a soldier. I said, are you in the service? No, I used to be. I said, oh, were you in the Army? Oh, no, sir. I was in the Marine Corps. So, really? I said, well, why'd you get out? He goes, oh, I didn't want to. I got kicked out. I said, you got kicked out? He goes, yeah. I said, well, what do you think about that? He goes, hell, I got to be a Marine. I don't care, Sergeant. I deserved it. I said, now wait now. This is a Marine admitting that it was his fault and he got kicked out of the Marine Corps. But he still did what? He loved the Corps. I said, so would you go back? He goes, Sergeant Major, I got to be a Marine. And I'm a Marine for life. Okay? Now, fast forward. Met a soldier that was retired. And I said, so how are you? Oh, doing great. I said, so how was your service? Transition, all that other thing. He goes, oh, it's okay. I said, well, no, you retired from the Army. You got to be a soldier for 20 years plus. Yeah. He goes, so how do you think your experience was in the Army? Oh, it sucked. I said, wait a minute. Come on now. Really? Did it, guy? And then after I talked to him, he had these phenomenal stories to share about his experience in the military. The moral to my story is that a young Marine got kicked out of the Marine Corps, and he's a Marine for life. And the young soldier retired with benefits for the rest of his life. And we didn't leave a lasting impression on that soldier. And he's not communicating it. And that's our fault. And we got to change that. We got to change the perception of our soldiers by investing in them throughout their career. And whether they serve 1 day or 30 years, they got to feel like they're soldiers for life, because that's the walking billboard. You can blame AMRG, the folks that put together our commercials, and it's not their fault, okay? But what we don't have is those walking billboards walking around talking about the great experience. And we do. So we do. There's a lot of them out there. But we need every single one of them. And it's easy to change that perception, especially in the last 90 days of their service. It's all about how you treat those young men and women till the day they leave. And it's already started. And it's working. Because 2007, when we started the first transition services, and then which later became Soldier for Life, it's changing the dynamic of service in our Army. And I equate it back to the time that was coined as the greatest generation, World War II. Then we had about 8 million veterans done with the war, and they did one thing. They went home for the next 2 generations and bounced their children and their grandchildren on their knee, and they said, service in your military is a good thing. We got to replicate that today. Okay? We got to change our image as an Army, because we got to change the perception, not the truth. The truth is, these young men and women have opportunity. The truth is, these young men and women are some of the bravest, most capable, competent people I've ever seen. And the myths about today's generation, ladies and gentlemen, are not necessarily true. I can tell you. That's been going on forever, as a matter of fact, talking about the next generation. Those of you who don't know, the word teenager, by the way, and you can check this on your Google machine after I'm done talking tonight, the word teenager actually comes from the rebellious youth of the 20s and 30s. Okay? Look this up. That was a negative connotation of youth in the 20s and 30s, the word teenager. Okay? And it was given them by their elders at the time. And actually, if you go back and look at articles, they were confident that that generation was going to destroy America within the next 2 or 3 decades. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, that was the greatest generation. Those are the people that won the Second World War and built the Industrial Revolution of this nation. Okay? I can tell you today, those young men and women that we get in the Army today, they're phenomenal. You just got to give them a chance. They're a little bit different than we are. Okay? Their attention span's about half or a third of ours, right? We know that, right? But their absorption rate is about 5 times of yours, because they've had the world's information in the palm of their hand since the day they were born. And by the way, it's not just that young soldier that's on their phone all the time. If you would have watched the break area like I was before you walked in here, every single one of you, regardless of your age, was on their cell phone doing the same thing. All right? So it's not just the millennials. It's everybody. All right? But we have data that proves, after we institute things like OPAT, we're seeing increased physical fitness scores, increases in weapon scores, increases in retention rates, and reduction in attrition rates in basic training and first-term service. This is a great generation that has a lot to offer. We just got to equip them with the information about the truth of service in our Army, which is way more than just service in Iraq and Afghanistan. Critically important to the success of our future, but we have way more to offer. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've educated and informed this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to come out to you tonight and talk to you and share with you some of the things that I'm working in order to support the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Army's priorities. As you can see, I'm very passionate about our young men and women, and we have no finer force that is here to serve you today. I promise you that. They're dedicated, they're everywhere, and their resiliency is unmatched. These young men and women today, many of which have more wartime experience than any single soldier in the history of the United States today. They're phenomenal young men and women, and they're ready to go back and do the task over and over and over again with nothing more than a thank you for your service. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time, and I'll take your questions. Thank you.
I want to make sure we get the microphone so that the several million listeners out there that we're live streaming this to, they'll be able to hear all this.
Okay.
Hey, Sergeant Major, what can the Army or what can soldiers do about the non-deployable rate as it stands right now? How can they fix that before the Army steps in to fix it?
Yeah, probably the easiest thing, and one of the highest number causing non-deployable, highest reasons that cause the number of non-deployables in the Army, are simple things. So these are not hard down people. This is not as big as a problem as most people make it out to be. This is simple as going to the dentist, okay, for our active, reserve, and guard forces. Now, each one of those has their complexities. Active is a little bit easier to remedy on a regular basis, but our guard and reserve forces, and we got to encourage them to do so. Okay, so we got to be creative and incentivize deployability in the Army. Okay, encourage them to do that, because that's an indication of our readiness, but it's a negative indication. So making sure that they're doing their PDHA, their annual checkups with their doctors, getting all their shots, doing the simple things. That accounts for the largest non-deployable rate. The second thing is we, as an institution, have to do a better job at recovery with our soldiers. As I talked about during my speech, is that there's an inherent risk in what we do. Okay? And this is a physical activity. And we hurt young men and women every day by the simple measure of the intensity we have to train on for the complex environment we have to live in. And we got to get better at recovery. And we're getting ready to invest in that. We need to put sports medicine docs down at the unit level, just like we do in our special mission units and our Ranger battalions. And we know for a fact that doing that will reduce that downtime with those soldiers and increase our readiness rates in each one of those organizations. And we're doing just that. So we got to invest in those soldiers. And then we got to change culture, to be very honest with you. We got to change the culture of readiness in our Army. And that culture has to exist all the way down to the individual soldier. That this is an institution that requires you to be ready to fight and win. And stand up to the oath that you gave. Defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. So I tell all the soldiers all the time is that we don't play home games. Our job is to play away games only. And you got to be ready to fight, and you got to be deployable to do that. Okay? Yes, sir.
Hey, Sergeant Major, first off, thanks. Thanks for all that you're doing. Thanks for the defense of our nation and be no do in your personal leadership and your friendship to the team. Two-part question. You highlighted one of the challenges that we're facing as a nation and as an Army. In fact, all of our joint forces is recruiting and retention and responsible growth. I like the moniker. But the challenge is, and there's a couple of us in here that highlight on Capitol Hill, the challenges that our nation faces as a national security issue. 71% of America's youth are not qualified to go in the military even if they wanted to, for three primary reasons: moral turpitude, criminal record, but unfortunately and most significantly, obesity and the physical fitness challenges that you're very familiar with. So how do we overcome that? Yeah. And we're recruiting to a 29% base then that everybody else is also looking for those teammates as well, in addition to the other services. Tying that to what we did not highlight here is the total force. Title 10, Title 32, our Guard and Reserve teammates as part of a total force of a nation, because their readiness ties to exactly what you're highlighting across our nation. Thanks.
Yes, sir. And this is of great concern. And we look at this all the time. USAREC is well vested in the demographics of the 18 to 24-year-old population of the United States of America. I think we're one of the leading consumers of that information because we're well vested in that population. And just recently, about 6 to 8 months ago, I called the Department of Education, and I wanted to talk to our military liaison over there to see if we were communicating some of the same issues and concerns that we were getting. Department of Education, phenomenal institution, teaches and has a very complex task of educating America's youth across our nation. But it was a very easy conduit to get into and figure out, how do we work collaboratively to fix what we see as a national issue. And what I found is there was nobody on the other end of that phone. So I asked the secretary, the chief at the time, and said, hey, I think we need to start putting a fellowship program within Department of Education. We did it for the Department of Labor when we recognized the problem of our young men and women getting hired in 2007 as part of the Soldier for Life and Transition Assistance Program. And it paid huge dividends for us. It was a direct conduit between us and the Department of Labor, the connection on what are the needs of the workforce and what are the skills necessary to get our soldiers into that workforce immediately after service. And I'm hoping to do the same thing with the Department of Education. This is a tough task. It's changing not just the minds of teachers and educators around the thing, but mothers and fathers. I think this is everybody's responsibility across the nation is to make sure that we have a next generation that's capable of preserving the idea and the ideology of this generation that would carry on the generation after. And it's concerning of me. You know, some of the problems that you talked about are some of our best recruiting areas too, and those numbers are getting worse. So youth obesity and some other things continue to rise, but those are the areas that we typically recruit from. So we're working this real hard. I think that we have to take on a bigger role as a nation to get after this problem, not just for the military, but the health and security and safety of our youth in America too, as well, sir. So I don't have all the answers, but we're going to start with talking to the institution that does a lot to develop those young men and women, which is the Department of Education. Okay.
Evening, Sergeant Major. Thank you. My name is Bruce. I'm a soldier medic. I currently work for the College Board, and you've talked a little bit about education issues. Two observations, then my question. Fewer and fewer soldiers are using the CLEP exam to earn college credit. Mm-hmm. And education transition seems to be an ongoing issue. What can my company, the College Board, do to help the Army on this issue?
That's excellent. I get this question all the time. I actually gave a speech on this when I was the Trade Officer Major at the CCME, Coalition for Colleges for Military Education. I don't know if your company's a part of that. We have to align our interests. And this might sound a little bit harsh, but we have to get away from the traditional aspects of how many credit hours can we get out of each soldier. And what we need to do is find out where the gaps and seams are to take the credit hours they earn while they're on active duty and match them with the gaps and seams that they need to fulfill the credit hours for a degree plan in the civilian sector, or a credential in the civilian sector, or a trade in the civilian sector. I think by partnering with us, it's delivering a better education opportunity for these young men and women. So I want to make sure that not just get a degree, but a degree that has value in the workforce. And the great gift given to us by the American taxpayer called tuition assistance, I want premium value for that, meaning I want something that translates to a skill that's going to be sought after by our industry in America. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to work closely with our academic institutions in America and make sure that we're just not trying to deliver the number of credit hours we can to our soldiers, but the right credit hours at the right time to match their career skills. We call it the progressive and sequential education system. Hope that answered your question. That's a little bit of trade ox army that came out of me. Did that sound good? I worked on that right before I came in here. Yeah, yeah. And I can assure you that TRADOC and the Army University is open arms. This is by no way and means to take any market share away from any university structure in America. That is not the intent of the Army University. The intent of the Army University is to simply give equivalent academic credit for the world-class training education that the taxpayers have already paid for. That's what it's to. And to work with civilian industry to find the gaps and seams to finish those credentials they need to be successful when they transition from service. Okay, thank you.
Sergeant Major, Major McCarthy from ILE. I'm an Army PA, and similar to the soldier medic in the back, I've noticed that our medics are one of the least employable on the other side of coming out of service. So you spoke a little bit to what we were doing to address the gaps and seams, but specifically for the medics who have had quite a bit of training, especially on-the-job training under PAs like myself. How do we get them to the place where they can actually get a job on the other side?
Yeah, thanks. That's a phenomenal question. So we went after this. Actually, and you're exactly correct, ma'am. They were one of our top 3 unemployed MOSs leaving the Army. 2 was our combat arms, and then the other one was our combat medics. And we went after this very aggressively. I'm happy to report that MedCom has this on full throttle right now. I can't give you all the specific details, but working accreditation for emergency medical technician, enlisted nurses program, which is very alive and well today. And we want to get them to a level of education and training that does 2 things. Again, this is not just about getting our soldiers degrees. This is important. This is about giving them the education to perform in a complex environment in the future. The days in a near-peer adversarial war of the golden hour are going to have to be extended to the golden 4, 5, or 6, or 7 hour. And those young men and women forward, serving as our combat medics, are going to have the capability to literally do wartime battlefield surgical procedures to retain that life for that long of a period. And I can promise you that MedCom is doing everything they can to make sure simultaneously they are credentialing while we deliver that world-class education. Yeah.
Good evening, Sergeant Major. CW3 Vought, Army Reserve. Thank you very much for being here this evening. My question centers around General Milley's second priority of growing the force in 2025 and beyond, and we're rolling out BRS, a blended retirement system, this year. My concern is just long-term, the loss of senior leadership on down the road, because that 20-year pension is certainly a nice carrot out in front of the cart. Any forecasting and thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, and we collaborated with our great the team that was put together to figure out the blended retirement system and proposed that to Congress, and with Congress after it was proposed, and worked on a lot of the issues and concerns that the chain of command had, and the study that Rand did as well. So bottom line is we got to train and educate our soldiers. Okay, so there's still a guaranteed benefit there. They still get the guaranteed benefit after 20 years. But we got to invest in these young men and women's what I call financial literacy. And we haven't done that, okay? And I'm sad to say that prior to doing so in the last 2 or 3 years, we were probably the worst service out of all three in doing so with our young men and women. And if done correctly, and if we educate and train them to make the correct choices, their compensation, I believe, is a fair compensation package for the future. I do, and I believe that. Now, I still would like to see some changes to it. We have an opportunity to communicate those changes to Congress in accordance with the law as laid out. It is very much my intent, and I have been communicating a few of those changes, which I'd prefer not to share tonight because I have to let our elected leaders have an opportunity to chew on those. And but what I do believe is, and I would not have stopped fighting it until I believe so, I do believe is a fair compensation package that is sustainable for the long term, and that's important. But it requires us as leaders to educate our young men and women to make sure they're making choices at 18. Not all of us in this room made great choices at 18. I don't want to hear about them. I'm not the priest. You don't have to confess to me. Okay? So, but not all of us did. But this is one thing, and we spent an entire year training and educating our force on this. And I made it very clear to our leaders, all the way down to our junior leaders, is that we can't influence their decision, but they gosh darn better have the education to make the right one on their own when they do. So that is open for their decision this year. Blended retirement option opened up first of the year. And I do believe that we've done an adequate job in training and educating them on their benefits. And they'll make the right choices. They will. So it is a sustainable, viable system that provides adequate compensation to our soldiers with a few tweaks. Yeah.
Any concern about, you hear so many soldiers, they get to 8 to 10 year mark, and they're like, well, I've got to go on and do the 20. That loss of that mid-career soldier, and we lose that, leadership moving forward.
And Congress gave us a tool under the new blended retirement system to get after that factor. That's always been an issue. So a choice of 10 years is the choice to stay or go. After 10, you just stay, so you're in it for the long haul. I think that the system has given us the flexibility and tools to be able to retain that talent. And it's called the retention bonus. So each service has the flexibility to give a retention bonus that's specifically designed to go after that target audience that historically makes a decision of whether or not they stay or go.
Right. Megan Myers, Army Times. So on the issue of a proposed policy wherein you would start the separation process after 12 months for a non-deployable, what does that look like in the short term? Who is held accountable for that soldier not getting to medical? Is it the soldier? Is it an NCO? Is it a commander? And in the long term, is a year long enough to decide, yes, you're never going to deploy again and we're going to start your medical process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first part of your question was, I'm a little confused by the first part of your question. It said,
in the short
term,
is someone going to start getting an email saying, like, you haven't been to medical, we're going to kick you out? Or is that, a company commander who's going to get that note that says, we're going to kick this soldier out if you don't get him to medical?
Yeah. And Megan, not to correct you, but we're not going to kick anybody out of the Army.
All right.
What the policy says, proposed policy says, is that if you're non-deployable for 12 consecutive months, we'll initiate separation procedures.
Right.
That in itself has a full procedure. So that doesn't mean 12 months exactly, so that in itself. And in that, in accordance with the law, any soldier separated for medical reasons will be processed through the PEB, the MEB, and the IDES process. And there's a very strict and refined system that we will allow all those soldiers to go through. Again, I don't want to confuse this, and I'm very clear about this. This is not about not taking care of soldiers. This is about building necessary readiness for the United States Army. And it's about getting back to changing the culture of that we're here to fight and win our nation's wars. We're always going to take care of the young men and women in this uniform. And our nation has a commitment, a very big commitment, through both the Army and the Veterans Affairs Administration to do just that. So I promise you, we are taking this very seriously, but this is no intention to disadvantage any soldier in the Army.
Do you think a year is long enough to say, all right, you're injured or you have an illness and it's not going to get better, so we're just going to decide it's
And that's in line with current policies that are close to that now. So the IDES process is similar, so a non-deployable rating, and if you can't be retained and serve on active duty, it's consistent with those same things. What the new policy proposed says, for any reason. So that's the difference in change in really rules and regulations. And then the proposed policy of 12 months in an 18-month period, non-consecutive, proposed. So those are the two major changes. But the administrative separation process and the medical review process, there will be no change to.
One more thing. So there had been some discussion recently about an incentive for maintaining your deployability, a monetary incentive. Is that something that's still on the table? Is that something you guys are still talking about?
Yes, actually, it is something we're talking about. Just recently, we've regenerated the conversation with the new Secretary of the Army, and something he wants to explore. So I had a proposal last year. We took a look at a thing called deployment pay, and it would be similar in nature to the Navy sea pay. We put that on hold and put some temporary fixes in there to incentivize deployability because of cost, to be very forthright to you. So we think there's an opportunity to explore the cost-benefit analysis of that for the future, and that's something the new Secretary has asked us to take a look at. Okay.
Sergeant Major, I'm Frederick Croson, the younger, but not the more handsome. I was curious about immigration and immigrants. I've seen throughout my dad's career and my coming up that we always have a lot of immigrants in the Army, and I thought their path to citizenship was pretty much guaranteed by their service. And I guess it was a couple of months ago there was a survey that went out. Should immigrants be granted citizenship on the basis of their
Service loss. Yeah.
And I'm curious as to the outcome of that survey, and if there's anything moving in one direction or another.
Sir, I have apologized. I'm not aware of the survey or the outcome, so I apologize. So we have always worked hard with our soldiers who serve the United States Army, who are not citizens of this country, but are here legally and meet all the requirements for service. And we've always worked with them to assist them to gain citizenship if they so desire. I'm not, unfortunately, familiar with the survey you're talking about, so I can't comment, but none of that has changed. Okay. Any last questions? No?
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for our SMA?
Okay.